So we're gonna go really memhei. But I just wanted to take a parak from Gimel through memhei. It's like the Tanya of the last week, and Tanya is a very interesting sefer because on the one hand, it contains such chidushim. You read through Tanya and your mind is blown, and even if you're from a yid for your entire life, you read through Tanya and it blows your mind. Even I remember growing up in Cheder. When did we start learning Tanya? We started learning Tanya at like the age of 13. My classmates, I think, were 14. I'm at the younger end of my grade. And so Tanya really contains some fantastic chidushim, and even at that age, it's hard to appreciate. But then as you learn it more and more, and you become more and more familiar with it, you come to appreciate the depth. On the other hand, Tanya also seems to be really just dashing Gemaras. You have a whole Gemara about Beinonim, and several Gemaras, several mentions there on Mamar Chazal, and the Alter Rebbe weaves a tapestry to explain what exactly Benoni is, what exactly a tzaddik is, what exactly a Rasha is, and he explains it in such a way that it almost seems Mimela. It's like, how else would you understand the Gemaras if not for that? And then the Alter Rebbe, he continues darshaning, and from Parak Lamed Hey and on, he's coming to discuss what exactly is the reason for why Benoni is here. And again, even though it's not, I would say it's less explicit in the Mamar Chazal, but still he's weaving everything together to explain what exactly we're here for. A Benoni is, I would say, representative of a more average Jew, or at least the Benoni is the pinnacle of what an average Jew can be. And so the Alter Rebbe sets out to explain what exactly the pinnacle of an average Jew can be. And I feel like this is something that has been discussed a lot throughout the ages. The Alter Rebbe just weaves it together in a way that we're able to appreciate it. It's an anthology of how we're supposed to live our lives, if you will. Parak Mem Hey, I feel like is, I'm not going to say exactly unique. It seems to be a little bit more of a ha'ara than anything. It's a very short chapter. It's 1 page and 4 lines. And Parak Mem Hey, I feel, is, if you want to say there's a chiddush in Tanya, I would say Parak Mem Hey is the chiddush in Tanya, which is a bold statement, and I could probably make a statement about any chapter, but at least we had Parak Mem Hey last week, and so I feel like maybe we're living with the times. We had a Pasha Friday and Shabbos, and so I want to examine Parak Mem Hey a little bit. I want to examine the broader context that it comes in, and then I want to point out what Alter Rebbe writes in the Siddur about Parak Mem Gimel through Mem Hey and onward, and I think it could really give us a good context. If we have time at the end, I want to contrast it to Nefesh Chaim, which is a bold thing to do, but that's only if we have time. So in Parak Mem Hey, the Alter Rebbe is coming off of talking about the Avodah of Ahava and Yira. You have a Kava Chesed, you have a Kava Gvura, and we relate to Hashem. Really, Ahava and Yira are two sides of the same coin, that when you appreciate your standing vis-a-vis Hashem, we're a person, we're down here, and we have our own lives going on, and you have Hashem, and how do we relate to Hashem? On the one hand, we relate to Hashem that Hashem is so great, and He's the source of everything, and He gives us everything, and more than that, just the great connection that we have internally, that we're from Him, and we have that relationship to Him, that causes Ava. You also have, at the same exact token, that Hashem is the great King, King of all kings, and besides for Schar and Einish, which is one level of Yira, you also have just the fact that when you stand before something so great, you automatically, you're stricken with fear. And we're always standing before Hashem. So, on the other side of the coin, you also have Yira. Then comes Alter Rebbe in Perek Mem Hey, and he says that this is all a good way to serve Hashem. He says, Oid yesh derech yashal lifnei ish. There's another good way before people to work in Torah and mitzvahs, lishma. And he explains that this is through the midah of Yaakov Avinu Alav Hashalim, the midah of Rachamim. I'm more or less just going to go through Perek Mem Hey. It's not too long to explain. It's, as I said, basically a page. So, a person should essentially arouse Rachamim Rabim on themselves, or I should say more particularly on the nitzis of godliness that resides within them, because every person has an neshama. We explained in Parak Beis, and we've been referencing throughout Tanya, and this spark of the soul, it's not samazeh that Hashem made a soul and the soul is holy. It's pasha from Hashem, and Hashem is so much greater than everything that we have in this universe. He's much greater than coffee and pastries, and nevertheless, it's invested in a world where Baruch Hashem we have coffee and pastries. But it's in a sense a very big rachmanis on the neshama, that the neshama is down here, and it's in a sense trapped in the mashchat chivya, and ultimately we have an avodah that when we shake and we arouse our nitzis of the kiss, it's pasha connected up there. Hashem is with us. Hashem is connected to us through this nitzis of the and so really it's not like it's been cut off. It's not like a fingernail that you cut it off and it's dead. it's pashut, it's alive, it's connected, and yet it's still trapped down here. We need to arouse mercy on the nitzitz eliki that resides within each and every one of us. Alter Rebbe has a few drushes. Really, it's interesting to note these drushes seems to be that he's not quoting sources for them. He's bringing them on his own. A lot of these are takadashins in other places, but he is saying it more stam. He says there's he says V'yashav Hashem v'yachameu. This is the idea of that. You have that Vayishak Yaakov l'Rachel v'Yisrael ko'el v'Yivka, and he says that Yaakov is midas rachmim, Rachel is knesses Yisrael. These are all ideas that are expounded on in other places, but it's interesting that he does seem to bring it stam. There are many chapters in Tanya that he Pasha brings so many different drushes that he doesn't even quote the sources. Usually he's quoting Zer, it's Chaim, if not Zer, it's Chaim, other Kisvei Arizal or Gemaras. It is interesting to note that in Parak Mem he is more or less seems to be quoting it on his own. And he says that this applies both to Torah and it applies to Tefillah. He says Machshava and Maisa. Maisa is Maisa Mitzvahs. And he finishes off with something that the Rebbe actually has a note on. I'm going to get to that hopefully if we get after what the Alter Rebbe writes in the Siddur. But he brings that, I want to find the Lashon. It says, he uses the word mamish twice. He says, I feel like there was a mamish before that also. But you have, so you have that, the line starts with basic. Basic Torah, Dibur, Machshava, Se'ion, Hinu Kines Neshikin Mamish. That when you work in Torah with Dibur and Machshava that you think into it, it's literally a level of Nishikin. And he also says earlier than that, I'm trying to find it. So I'm not finding it for some reason. There's another lashon of mamash that he uses. It's about chibuk. Techabkeni, possibly.
Talks about
no. Yeah, so it's about my mitzvahs. I'm just trying to. I don't know. I'm not seeing it for some reason, but it's in there. We'll get to it. Bez Hashem, when we get to it in its place, we'll find it. Anyhow, this is the Avodah that Alter Rebbe lays out in Parak Mem, and then he continues on expounding this idea in Parak Mem Vav, but that's more today's Tanya rather than Tanya for the last week. It's also something he continues on with until Parak Nun Aleph, more or less. So, we mentioned last week that the Avodah that's discussed in Parak Mem Aleph, and really from Parak Lamates at least until Parak Mem Daled, is an Avodah that's very directly referenced in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Aleph. Siman Aleph, Sif Aleph, the Ramah, we had the Alter Rebbe, he takes more than one sif to talk about it. And Tachlis Geret this is an ancient Avodah that goes back to Mer Nevuchim, and maybe even earlier, and it's the beginning of the Avodah in Shulchan Aruch. What's interesting is that if you follow the chain of logic, Shulchan Aruch Sif Beis is this. The Avodah of Tikkun Chatzos. The Avodah of Tikkun Chatzos is an Avodah. It seems to fall into the wayside. We'll get to Bez Hashem with some theories as to why that could be. But Tikkun Chatzos is an Avodah, essentially. It goes back to David HaMelech even, and he would wake up in the middle of the night, and he would sing praises to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's especially been a thing with, I say Chassidim before the Baal Shem Tov, those kinds of Chassidim, they would wake up in the night, and they would cry about the Chorban Beis HaMikdash. The Shlomo writes about it a lot. There's the Arizal. It's very well expounded upon the idea of Tikkun Chatzos, what you're supposed to say, what you're supposed to think. Ultimately, the Alter Rebbe seems to be taking this idea of Tikkun Chatzos and he's applying it, Pashan Tag Lechalebin, in every single aspect. Because the whole avodah of Tikkun Chatzos is to talk and cry about the Beis HaMikdash, to cry about the Korban. And he says this is essentially the avodah that we're doing over here. And the avodah of the Korban is of crying about the Korban is to say that you have holiness in the world and it's been destroyed and now we're in Golos, and so he says this idea of Golos is something that applies to each and every one of us with the nitzitz elikis that exists within us. We all have a nitzitz elikis that exists within ourselves, and that nitzitz elikis is in Golos. This is Pashat the avodah of Tikkun Chatzos. Now, I would be saying this on my own, and it would be an interesting play to be saying, in Shulchan Aruch Sif Aleph you have that, and then the Alter moves on to to Parak Mem, and he talks about something similar to Tikkun Chatzos. But that being said, Baruch Hashem, the Alter wrote a Siddur, and in the Siddur he has a Siddur of Tikkun Chatzos. And Seder, not to talk about the actual. It's mainly Kapitel Achaf Tehillim and miscellaneous collected psukim, but he has Aruch for Tikkun Chatzos. Very fortunate for us, and I want to read a little bit from the Aruch for Tikkun Chatzos. Firstly, he says it's a Sefes Bir the Mashkasa Lukoti Amarim Parak Mem Gimel. So Parak Mem Gimel of Tanya is again expounding the Aveda of Ava and Yira, how we're supposed to relate it, how we're supposed to bring it out, and it's talking about Yira Primus and Chitenis. It says Yira Primus is a Yira Speches, that a person is embarrassed standing before Hashem, and Yira Chitenis is more external than that. It's about that you're not that you actually appreciate necessarily what the relationship with Hashem is, but that you appreciate that Hashem is great, and you appreciate that there is some feeling to be had before Him. It's like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that if you have a person and he sees the king, and everyone is bowing before the king, the king walks into the room and everyone is stricken with a panic. So he'll also be stricken with a panic because you react in that kind of way. So it's more of a chisanistic way. You don't appreciate necessarily what's going on with the king, but you have that chisanistic
awareness.
Yeah, exactly. Was it you that I was for? No, someone else about awareness and consciousness. But anyhow, so yeah, you have that awareness of the king, and he continues that this is the beginning of a person's avodah, to try to appreciate Hashem in the ways that we can, and he explains more ways. Again, it's a hara on Tikkun Chatzos. This is about Parak Mem Gimel and on, and I don't want to get too caught up in that. That's not necessarily the teichin of Parak Mem Hey. This is all the beginning, the outset of Parak Mem Hey, as in what comes before Parak Mem Hey. And then the Alter Rebbe says that sometimes a person hits a roadblock in their avodah. They're trying to arouse the Yira and the Ava, and it's just not going. There are reasons why this could be. We mentioned last time it could be firstly that it's hard for a person, just practically that the source of their soul is not from so high, and they're trying together, and they're not able to get there. Sometimes it happens because a person has averes, and the averes are something that cause a separation between them and Hashem. It's brought in Sefer Chassidim, and the Alter Rebbe brings it also from Sefer Chassidim. And then the Alter Rebbe says that when a person taka hits this roadblock, so what are they supposed to do? It says the advice that's given for this that a person should place pain on their soul for the fact that they're not able to achieve this yira, which is called Churban Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is a connection of the words, a combination of the words, yira and shalim, complete yira. So, B'sibas Gol Tashkino.
The Rebbe says the reason why we don't do Tikkun Chatzos these days is because the average person cannot go from Meridus to have an Ava, like to go from Meridus to Simcha. Because of that, and of the quality that's lower than those generations, therefore we have to focus on Simcha. There's a clear answer why Tikkun Chatzos is. They can't do it, but it's not really the avodah of our times.
We're going there.
Okay,
we're gonna expand.
It just came in my head.
No, definitely. That's the ikr to build on. We're trying to.
Shainim would be in a tnuah of Meridus for X amount of hours until they were able to, finish that part of it, and then quickly turn the page into a.
Tikkun Rachel, Tikkun Leah.
Yeah. Okay.
You see, Paul, if you want to look at the actual Tikkun Chatzos for a second, you have all of the things about Al Nar Bavel. You have how there was the destruction, and then Pasha the Alter Rebbe says, "Acher kach t's'ir lokum." You should arouse yourself to rise up, and you start reading Sukkim about hope, and then you have Tikkun Leah, which is about all of the greatness that exists, and how Hashem is always with us, etc., etc. Taka, that's the Seder Tikkun Chatzos. We're gonna get there, Hashem. It's all in due time. He says a person should place that a person has Yerushalayim, that there is Yerushalayim, and Churban Yerushalayim is Churban of Yerushalayim. The taka is a lack of Yerushalayim, and so he explains about Yerushalayim a little bit, and then he says that you have taka the Nitzah Kiss, you have the godliness that we have Yaakov Chalon Achalase, as he explains in Parak Mem Hey in Tanya. So essentially, it seems that from Ve'esa Yotza, he's getting into what is the next piece of advice. Now in Tanya, he doesn't explicitly say Parak Mem Hey is what happens when you can't properly do Parak Lamed Tes through Mem Daled, or maybe earlier than Parak Lamed Tes.
Tanya is not really a B, C, D step.
Yeah.
It could be C here, and it could be B for you
100%.
here.
I do want to make the contrast between what he's writing over here and what he's writing in Tanya. But for what he's saying in the Seder of Tikkun Chatzos, this is a Ara, this is a Tesefes beer. In Tanya, what the Alter Rebbe is trying to do is let me just, I want to finish this quickly and then I'll get to there. There's a lot of things to be covering over here. So, essentially, he says that you have the Yaakov Chal Nachlasa, you have that we have an Nitzaliki inside of us, and that we need to arouse mercy on the Nitzaliki, and this is the way that we're able to, in a sense, get out of this route for the Churban Yerushalayim. That's essentially the gist of what he says over here. And it's an interesting thing to read. I don't want to necessarily read the whole thing in its entirety. It is a Tanya share, but I did want to bring out, this is something Alter Rebbe, this idea, this connection between Parak Mem Hey seemingly seems to flow directly from, he says Parak Mem Gimel, we were talking about Parak Mem Gimel, and directly after Parak Mem Gimel and Tanya, you have Parak Mem Dal and you have Parak Mem Hey, and he continues over here also, what happens if you're not able to, he seems to be making that connection. So that was mainly just to prove that the idea of Parak Mem Hey is a continuation. It's also interesting, it's a continuation of Shulchan Aruch. You go from the Shavis Hashem Lenegdi Samid to you should be worrying about Churban Beis HaMikdash. But with all of that being said, as was pointed out, that in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is not saying that you have step A, step B. These are both ways in Avodah that work. And maybe I'll jump a little bit to what I wanted to talk about at the end, just to make this work, because it's a very interesting point. There's a sefer called Nefesh HaChaim that is often quoted as being the niglah'dike response to Tanya. That's what they say. I have had Mistagdim randomly walk over to me being like, oh, it says in Tanya Parakeh, well actually, look at what it says in Nefesh HaChaim. What do you have to say? Now, it is interesting. I think that most people that go through Nefesh HaChaim aren't actually necessarily going through it. They just know that there's what it says in Tanya, the niglah'dike response. It seems to be more or less, just to get to cut to the point of what it says in Nefesh HaChaim, people like to contrast with Tanya, is that the Alter Rebbe says that the idea of Torah Lishma is to connect to Hashem. Nefesh HaChaim seems to take great issue with this. He says, how can you say that? He brings some rice. You can go in or her about the rice. I don't want to go in or her about the rice, because at the end of the day, if you actually read through the whole, it's either Shar Dalet or Parak Dalet or however it's formatted, of Nefesh HaChaim, he actually very strongly encourages to do exactly what the Alter Rebbe encourages to do. The distinction in Nefesh HaChaim is he wants to say that Torah Lishma is taka for the sake of Torah as opposed to Dveikos. It's more of a nitpicky point, but he says taka. He says explicitly you should take time to do Dveikos every day, and he says not only should you take time to do Dveikos every day, you should take time to do Dveikos every hour, as Alter Rebbe says at the end of Parak Mem Aleph. So it's possibly not a difference in practicality of what you're supposed to do. He's trying to make a distinction. Now, really, you have, I'm not going to say a question on the Alter Rebbe, but how is Taka Torah Lishma Dveikos? If you say Lishma, what is the Lishma? If you wanted to say that Taka Lishma is for Hashem, you maybe say Lishma, because Hashem usually refer to Hashem in the masculine. Parak Mem Hey is saying there's another way of a person to taka work in Torah and Mitzvahs Lishma, or Lishman, he says, so you can day over there. And he outlines a way that seems to be different from everything that is in Parak Lamates through Ramdalad. In Parak Lamates through Ramdalad, he has, and if you want to say the backing of Tesis we had in the Seitzah recently, I think it was Daf Chaf Beis, that Tesis talks about Torah Lishma, and he says taka over there that connecting to Hashem is what it means to have Torah Lishma. He says there's other ways. Lakanter is to try to disprove people, is a way the person can learn Torah. Dafka Shalei Lishma, we had in the Alter Rebbe, that you have a limbo stage of Torah that's not Shalei Lishma and Torah that's not Lishma, that exists in a limbo, and then when you learn it again, that it gets elevated. And over here, the Alter Rebbe goes and he outlines a way that is not that. But when you follow the logic of the Alter Rebbe, it taka makes sense, and you can come to appreciate that Torah Lishma is not something that necessarily needs to follow one exact path, and how we get to Parak Mem Hey. Essentially what it is that we have an avodah down here. Torah is not stam hazeh. Torah is something that exists so we can have a connection with Hashem, side so that we can elevate the world, and side so that we can bring Hashem down here. Whichever direction you're coming from is still Torah Lishma. When you're trying to bring down Getlachait in the world, that you have, you're trying to make a derba tachtenum, which is what it's talking about really, mainly from Parak Lamed Haven until Parak Mem Daled, and really through Parak Nun Gimel, we're saying in this kav in Avodah. So, in this, you have the idea of lishma. This is what Torah is for. It's the connection. It's the contract, if you will. But it's more than just a contract. It's the nisuin. It's everything between us and the kedushin. Everything between us and Hashem.
So the lishma part.
So when you learn Torah lishma, it is for the sake of that. It's like when you do something for your
It
marriage.
has to be automatically Lishma. You're learning Torah.
Well, it should be.
It's an educational pursuit.
Earlier in Tanya it says people can do it for exactly intelligence purposes. Yeah.
That
50-50.
Halavai, we should be.
that should firstly halavai we should talk about.
Now we're even learning for education.
Some people learn because they want to be big chacham and
A
disprove other
scholar.
people.
They want to be a scholar.
Some people want to disprove other people, and that's why they learn Torah, which is in a sense the worst thing. So tachlis keret. Tachlis keret is that there's ways of learning Torah. I'm very happy that it's like so removed, like Torah shaloi l'shma. But no, there are ways of learning Torah that's talking out l'shma.
I don't want to do it today without lishma.
But if you're learning to make a derech b'tachteinu, if you're learning to bring niglah'dike into the world,
It has to be Lishma.
that is lishma. That does say it's lishma. The Alter Rebbe in Parak Mem Hey lays out another way. It really, if you from Parak Lamed Tessin through Mem Daled, the Alter Rebbe had the support of Tesis. You could always pin it on Tesis. How do I say that Dveikus is lishma? Well, Tesis says learn for the sake of Hashem, so that's lishma. Does say it's lishma. Parak Mem Hey, the Alter Rebbe expands this idea. He's working on the idea that if you're learning and doing mitzvahs also for the sake of the nitzvah, the key that exists within you, it's niglah'dike. That is niglah'dike, and Torah is not just to bring Hashem down here; it's also to raise ourselves up out of galus. When you do that, that's also Torah lishma. If you look at if you want to focus on the Nefesh HaChaim, the Nefesh HaChaim says, how could Dveikus and Hashem be? How could Dveikus and Hashem be lishma? He has his rayas, and I don't want to get down into the rayas in here. But when you think about what the Alter Rebbe is saying, the only problem, in a sense, with saying that learning Torah for the sake of Torah is lishma is that it's not a kavanah veda. Torah is really sublime, and you also have the idea of expounding in Torah, bringing it down here. But to just say for the sake of Torah without saying we're bringing something up or we're bringing something down is not. You're not moving anything. We're here to be mahalchim. We're not here to stam sit. So to learn Torah for some theoretical ideal of the sake of Torah, I don't even know what that would look like. I don't know that there is a way that would look like. It is in a sense. It's not accomplishing anything. It's good. It's great, but it's not an accomplishment. It's not an avodah. So, in a sense, it's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. That to learn Torah, lishma, pasha for the sake of Torah, with there's nothing, you're not making the b'tachtenim, you're not raising up the person. There is definitely a mila in Torah, the pure essence of Torah, but that's not what the Alter Rebbe is coming to discuss in Tanya. In Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is coming to discuss what is Aveda. Now, the Alter Rebbe, in his conception also, is that Reisvukah is not just his conception, it's based on Zayhar, etc. But you saw that Reisvukah Shabrichu Kul Achad, that Yidden, Eibusher, and Torah were all one. And you also plus Kishin, Miskashin, Davadah, that you have three knots and they're tied with each other. And again, Yidden, Torah, and I mean, it's part of the same line, but Yidden, Torah, and Hashem, it's all one and it's all connected. When a Yid learns Torah, we're connecting to Hashem. We're also bringing down Hashem into the world. And so, this is the Avodah. This is the Avodah that exists within Torah. When we learn Torah, when we do mitzvahs, we're either elevating ourselves or bringing Hashem down here. This is all in the path of making it there b'tachtenim. So, this is, I think, the Chiddush of Parak Mem Hey. The Chiddush of Parak Mem Hey is that you had Tikkun Chatzos until now. And Tikkun Chatzos is taka to arouse mercy for the Churban Habayis. But to take it in such a way where it's not just down for the Churban Habayis, that it's something that we want to base in the Mikdash. And when we say Mipnei Chateinu Galinu Maratzenu, when we daven in Musaf, and when we daven B'chal, that we want to have the base of Mikdash again, Shibana base of Mikdash, Meher Be'meinu, we should taka B'zecha. When we have all of this, it's taka. It's not just tamazeh that it's something that we want the same way that we want. There's a lot of things that we want. So some people they daven that they should have. First, they should get married because they want to do the mitzvahs. Some people they daven that they should have. I don't know how they put on a mezuzah. I'm trying to think of like, but people they want to be able to have the experiences in mitzvahs. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to go into Eretz Yisrael because he wanted to do the mitzvahs at Eretz Yisrael. We have also in Chassidus that explains that Yitzhak wanted to bring about the ultimate redemption through that. But you have the notion that exists. You want to do a mitzvah. The Alter Rebbe says, and Chassidus explains, B'chlal, in a lot of places, it's not sound like that. It's not just that we do a mitzvah because we want to collect all the mitzvahs. We want to do all 613. In Kabbalah, that's also a concept, by the way. In Sha'ar Gedolim, there's a lot about how every person needs to fulfill 630 mitzvahs. Machshava Dibur and Maisa, we actually had a reference to that, I think, in Lukoti Torah of the end of Kedishim, a reference to it. Ultimately, the avodah that we have down here is we're talking here to make it b'tachtenim, not just to accomplish mitzvahs. And I think the chiddush of Parak Mem Hey is that you could take the avodah of Tikkun Chatzos and to bring it out in our day-to-day life, not in a way that's necessarily continuing from something else. Let's say a person taka, they don't have the yira, and they're not able to bring it out. And because you're not able to have the yira, the advice for this is to bring out Parak Mem Hey. It's taka true. If a person's taka struggling with Parak Mem Aleph, you would say maybe the avodah is to go to Parak Mem Hey. And I mean, taka, we start with Parak Mem Aleph, we would go to Parak Mem Hey. If a person's taka struggling with it, then the Alter Rebbe is already giving the advice. But it's also something that stands on its own. He says it's derech yashal l'fnei ish. It's a way that you just have, you're able to taka, just live your life with this, that we're trying to elevate the niglah'dike. It's something that stands on its own. So I think this is the chiddush of Parak Mem Hey. Now, as far as the avodah of tikkun chatzos and of turning around, why we're not doing it, the taka is the point of miriros and simcha. That tikkun chatzos needs to start off with miriros and then to turn around to simcha. And it's very difficult for us to turn around. But I think that's something to add to that, to add some extra spice, is that it depends where the miriros is coming from. As Alter Rebbe explains earlier in Tanya, that you have a difference between asvus and you have a difference between miriros. That asvus is sadness. Miriros is, it has a direction. It's not just sadness, it's that there's something particular that needs to be worked on.
Depression.
I don't want to... Depression and...
Bitterness.
Bitterness. That's the... Yeah. You could translate asvus as depression. It's very hard to sometimes find all the translations. Sometimes when I'm learning a mimer, I try to translate like this word, this word, and this word. But then the Rebbe will use like 4 adjectives, and you ran out of adjectives. The English doesn't have that.
If it leads you to depression, it's coming from a bad place.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And if it leads you to a good place, it's coming from a good place.
Exactly. Tikkun chatzos is about miriros. Now, if a person is getting into tikkun chatzos and they're not doing it with the forethought of taka, what it means to have yiras shamayim, then when they start doing tikkun chatzos, what are they getting sad about? Is it that they're getting sad about avodas Hashem? It's very difficult to say they're getting sad about avodas Hashem, because as in the whole point of getting sad about avodas Hashem is that there's an avodas Hashem that's happening. Avodas Hashem is this or that. It's not really going so well, and you're trying to get out of the rod on avodas Hashem. If a person is trying to arouse sadness without actually having a rod on avodas Hashem, it's easy enough to get sad. If a person says and thinks about the world, I'm sure that there's enough things to be sad about. But it needs to be dafka sadness in avodas Hashem, and I think that's in a sense the kunz of tikkun chatzos and why it's not necessarily so applicable nowadays. If you want to give an extra day in what the Rebbe says, that stam sadness about regular things is not the way that you do tikkun chatzos, because you're not able to easily transform that into gladness. But bitterness about taka avodas Hashem, if the avodas Hashem isn't going good, when you think about Parak Mem Hey, you think about onward, and this is something that we're going to be expounding upon as Hashem in the next few chapters. When a person taka has bitterness about that is something that you're taka able to transform right away. When a person is thinking about the fact that they don't have yiras shamayim the way that it needs to be, and they taka arouse mercy on the niglah'dike, that is something that the nature of it is that it's taka able to turn over. Real bitterness, you're able to taka turn over in a good way. Sadness is something that you can't. So that's nowadays it's very hard. We taka need to work on the avodah. If we would be working on it, and we should be able to work on the avodah in such a way that is taka the worst problem. That's the avodah that we're thinking about. And if that's taka not going, when we think about Parak Mem Hey, we're taka able to turn it over and transform it.
In general, I found in life that when you're a bitterness or a frustration or an anger about something, as long as it's contained, can actually be fuel for a lot of positivity. Right? You could be angry about something that happened, but as long as the anger is not the continuing drive for that, but it's enough to usually get people to take action, right? Like after October 7th, people are upset or angry about something, and it created action, but the ongoing anger can create depression and things like that.
But it needs to be a very specific what it's coming from.
Right.
It can't just be.
It can't just be a general anger.
If a person wakes up one day and they think I'm sad for whatever reason, that's not the miriros that you transform. And even if you're looking for something to be sad about, we shouldn't be looking for things to be sad about. If you have taka and avodas Hashem and you're working on it and avodas Hashem and it's a raw, then you transform that. That's taka, something that's able to be easily transformed. But stam sadness is something that we need to be sure.
Because then it becomes an obsession.
Yeah, but ultimately when we do this, we have almost haftacha from the Alter Rebbe that when we do this avodah, that we arouse mercy. Certainly it's gonna be able to be aroused upon him, and yeah, l'chaim we should taka be zeichet to avodah.
By the way, the two...